come from raised taxes to pay for giveaways, or they'll just turn on the digital presses here at the Federal Reserve. But economists say doing that will cause what's known as hyperinflation, the kind that makes your money virtually worthless. But for now, at least, Joe Biden says, enjoy your money while you've got it. For Newsmax, Mike Carter, New York.
So here to weigh in on all of this is Peter Schiff, president of Euro Pacific Capital. So Peter, you were down on Wall Street about a decade or so ago talking about the Occupy Wall Street protesters. So I want to ask you, what is the biggest misconception among Americans about how our economy actually works?
Well, a lot of people think that the economy works because everybody spends money. But actually, that's putting the cart before the horse. The reason that people can spend money is because people produce goods and services that you're able to buy with that money. In fact, it's the production of goods and services that gives value to the money. And that is the problem with what Biden is doing. He's simply creating money out of thin air without any productivity associated with that money. Americans aren't working to earn the money by producing goods and providing services. They're just cashing government stimulus checks. And so what we're doing is we're spending money we didn't earn to buy stuff that we didn't produce. And yes, the result of this is prices go up. And in fact, I think prices are going to go way up, unlike we've ever seen in this country. And the vast majority of Americans are really going to be impoverished by the cost of this government spending, because all the money the government spends must be paid for somehow. And it's not going to be paid for by the rich. It's going to be paid for by average Americans, working Americans, who are going to see the value of the paychecks that they're earning diminished dramatically by all the inflation the government is creating to finance all the spending.
And in fact, I want to take a look at what's in this plan, or I guess several plans at this point that Joe Biden is putting out there. He says that he wants to pay for these proposals by raising corporate tax rates, by raising capital gains taxes, perhaps getting at some point down to a marginal tax rate. Our viewers are looking at the numbers right there that he's proposing just in the $1.8 trillion American Families Plan. So I just laid out exactly what he says he wants to do in order to pay for that. Does it add up?
No, not at all. I mean, first of all, the taxes that they actually collect will be much less than they think, because corporations will be impacted by the higher taxes and will try to avoid those taxes the best they can. So the government won't collect as much as they think. But the bigger problem is all of these spending bills in the Biden plan are probably going to cost 5 to 10 times as much as the government believes. And that's because the public is going to respond to these subsidies and incentives by going out of their way to qualify for them. So, for example, the paid leave, almost every American who earns, maybe $40,000 to $100,000 a year, all these Americans are going to figure out how to take advantage of a government-paid 90-day vacation every single year. So a lot more people are going to be applying for the benefits than the government believes. The same thing with government-provided child care. And in fact, child care costs are going to go through the roof once Americans realize that they can have it for free. When you can get something for free, demand goes up. When demand goes up, price goes up. So the cost of child care is going to skyrocket, and a lot more people are going to be taking advantage of it because they're going to be pushing the cost on the government. And so the amount of money that's going to be printed to fund all this spending is going to dwarf the estimate. So it's all going to come from one source, and that's the Federal Reserve. That means you better get rid of your dollars now, because if you hold on to them, they won't buy very much.
And Peter, the new proposals, they bring the president's proposed spending to a whopping $6 trillion. And when we talk about what they're doing and adding to the deficit, the budget, things of that nature, I often hear people say, yes, we're borrowing from the future. We're borrowing from our grandkids, things of that nature. And sometimes I don't think that the harm of that is necessarily articulated the right way. So I want to ask you, can you really explain for people what it means when we're borrowing that kind of money?
Well, the idea is that our grandchildren are going to repay these debts, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think the debts are going to be repudiated right now through inflation. It is the current generation of Americans who are going to bear the cost of all this profligacy. You've got to remember that government spending is taxation. So every time President Biden talks about more money the government's going to spend, that's more money that you're going to have to, or costs that you're going to have to cover. The government is taking all that money away from you, whether you know it or not. And even if they don't have the honesty to take your money, they will do it dishonestly by taking your purchasing power. When the government prints money and gives it to somebody else to spend who didn't earn it, the value of the money that other people earned is diminished, and therefore the amount of goods and services that they can buy is diminished, and that loss of purchasing power is a tax. And you better get ready for the mother of all tax increases, because it's coming, and it's going to hit the middle class and the working poor the hardest.
I mean, that's exactly what we saw in some European countries who, by the way, Europe is not climbing back from this pandemic the same way that the United States is. Their growth has been anemic coming out of this whole situation as compared to what we're seeing in the United States. And a lot of people are concerned that increasing tax rates at this time is really going to stifle that. So what do you think the U.S. government should be doing in this process coming out of the pandemic, if playing a role at all?
Well, first of all, the U.S. economy isn't even growing. Remember, all we're doing is spending the money the Fed prints to buy products the rest of the world produces. Look at our trade deficits. They have skyrocketed. We've never seen anything like this, the largest merchandise trade deficits in U.S. history, because our economy is so weak, we can't produce the things that we consume, so we are more dependent than ever on the productivity of the rest of the world. So it is a myth that the U.S. is enjoying a recovery. This is the mother of all bubbles, and it's about to meet the mother of all pins when the dollar crashes.
Yeah, and by that point, it might be too late. It's a really scary situation. But Peter Schiff, I really appreciate you coming on the program tonight. Thank you.
My pleasure.
And still ahead, questions surrounding the death of Kevin.